There it is. The camera's on. What's up there, YouTube? Kenny here, also known as SoundFan85. And good morning. It's morning here. I just woke up. I flew in from Spiro last night, and boy, are my arms tired. Right. So anyway, so this gamer log, I really haven't done something like this in a while, and I really kind of wanted to do it because it is a great time to be a PlayStation fan. Myself included. I'm a fanboy. Admittingly so. I'm a fanboy. What with Horizon Zero New Dawn out, and it's Aloy becoming the face of PlayStation, pretty much. I mean, I don't think they've made it official yet, but they will eventually. Because, let's face it, that chick is a powerhouse for Sony. So, at the moment, it's a really good time for PlayStation. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through a quick list. It's not a small list, but it's not big either. Which, was kind of a giggity moment, and I missed it. Anyway, but these are some titles I've played in the past on PlayStation or Sega or arcade that I would love to see either remastered for PlayStation 4 or to appear on PlayStation Now. Now, if you're not familiar with PlayStation Now is a service that they use to rehash PlayStation 3 titles. There's over 450 plus titles on this thing. I'm subscribed. I love doing it. It's actually how I record my Beyond Two Souls series, which I need to finish, and I keep forgetting to record. It's a busy lifespan lately. So I would love to see these titles either on there or redone in some way for either just PlayStation or new gen in general. So let's go ahead and start off the list with Lollipop Chainsaw. Now, I guess before we get to this, let me go ahead and note, these may or may not be PlayStation exclusives. I played some of these on Sega Genesis, again in the arcade, so on and so forth, just like I mentioned before. So, Lollipop Chainsaw. Lollipop Chainsaw was probably one of the greatest PlayStation 3 games I'd ever played for one solid reason. The story is ridiculous. You have this chainsaw-wielding cheerleader who comes from a long line of, I think it was either demon hunters or zombie hunters. I think it's demon hunters. Who has a very bubbly attitude, but is a hardcore badass at her core. It's hilarious. Her boyfriend becomes a zombie. She cuts off its head, carries it on her hip. The head still talks. She used some sort of magic to keep his brain intact or something. And he still interacts with her. So it's a pretty good storyline and far out there characters when it comes to demons. There's one that is like Elvis and does all the oh kind of thing. That's a poor Elvis impersonation, but you see my point. But a very fun game. Okay, so I had to skip there because the software bugged out on me. Anyway, it's a great title. I would love to either see a remaster or it put on PlayStation Now. It would be fantastic. It was on PlayStation 3. One notable thing about it that I've always noted whenever I talk about Lollipop Chainsaw, it's one of the few games that rewards, for lack of a better word, perverseness. In that, if you position the camera, because it's a third-person player, so you have the character on the screen that you're controlling. It's just like Horizon Zero Dawn. That kind of gameplay is what I'm describing here. So if you position the camera to try to look up, I can't remember her name. I want to say Candy, but that's not right. Anyway, if you try to look up the main character's skirt, there's an achievement called like Peep Show or something. And what she does is she positions herself. She positions her hand to block the camera, and she comments on it. It's really funny. So it kind of rewards perverse behavior because when you look at the basis of the game and when you look at gameplay, it is a little perverted. Let's just be honest. But anyway, if you haven't seen anything on it, be sure to check it out. I would love to be able to stream it or record it. Unfortunately, that would require me getting a capture card and getting back my PlayStation 3, which, to be honest, is a bit of a long shot at this point. And I won't go into specifics, but the PS3 has kind of become crucial to one of my family members. So I could always get another one, but hey, I just bought a brand new video card, so can't really afford to get one at the moment. So maybe in the future. We'll see. Next up is a PlayStation 2 title, Haunting Ground. Haunting Ground is a dark story. It takes after its predecessors like Silent Hill, for those that have played it, Fatal Frame, stuff like that. It's about a girl that gets into a car crash and she wakes up on an estate that is very rich and very ancient. As she wakes up, she starts noticing weird statues, including one of her pregnant. There is a creepy owner of the estate that is keeping an eye on her from a distance. There is a creepy butler. There's a very big monster roaming about. He's kind of like a steroided out version of Chunk from the Goonies. So the whole game involves you befriending a dog who helps you sense danger and hide. There's not a whole lot of combat in this because it's more about hiding and surviving and finding your way out of the house, puzzles, stuff like that. So very cool game, very cool atmosphere. And I would love to see that remade. I think, again, with some of these titles, it may not be possible because licensing agreements may be up. Sony may not be able to get it anymore or something like that. But Haunted Ground was definitely one of my picks. Next up was Valkyrie Profile 1 and 2. The very first Valkyrie Profile came out on PlayStation. The second one came out on PlayStation 2. These are fantastically beautiful games. And great stories, too. They're not your standard 3D RPGs. They're actually 2D. But again, just beautiful games. Beautiful artwork. You look up some gameplay of them. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Okay, so next up we have Xenosaga. Now, for those not aware of Xenosaga came out on PlayStation 2. Full-blown RPG, including story length-wise. These games, each at a minimum, had about 80 plus hours per game when it came to story. Intense, and a beautiful game, too. Some notable characters was Cosmos. Cosmos was fantastic. There was also this kid that reminded me of Kid Death from Soul Eater. I can't remember his name. Anyway, gun-wielding rich kid. Kind of a cool addition to any team. But the story was central around like 6 or 7 different main characters that would come and go from the story. But the main contenders in it were Shion, one of the main characters, and Cosmos. Cosmos is an android. Very powerful android, by the way. And Shion is her creator. Shion thinks of Cosmos as a daughter. She wants to protect her. It's a pretty cliched sci-fi story, but at the same time, it's fantastic, and I love the story behind it. So I spent a lot of time in Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3 back on PlayStation 2. I would love to see a remastered collection of that. Maybe not a total redo, but a remaster would be great, and it would look fantastic. It would be so awesome. So, next up, straying away from RPGs, we're going to go for Rogue Trip Vacation 2012. Rogue, R-O-G-U-E. This game was kind of a mock-up Twisted Metal. Really fun game. Very out there, but it was out on PlayStation 1. And again, it played just like Twisted Metal, except some very far out there characters. It had a Daisy Duke type character who was very scantily clad and everything, and I always picked her for reasons. There was also another guy I picked. He drove what did he drive? It was like a dune buggy kind of thing. If you've never played it, again, you can look up the gameplay here on the channel, but it was a crazy sort of game with crazy contraptions. I just remember the game being very enjoyable. It had a weird soundtrack too. And actually with some fairly notable bands. A bit underground, but still kind of cool. Alright, next up. There is currently I believe it's a Kickstarter underway for a game. It's either a Kickstarter or the game's already started. I can't remember. It's in development. I know that much. That is inspired by the next game I'm going to mention, and I have high hopes for it. I don't remember the name. I'll try to look it up and add it at the bottom of the video. If I don't, check back. I'll try to have it up. Or you can Google it. But Road Rash. For those that grew up, Road Rash was a very cool game. Essentially, the purpose of Road Rash, you had different bikes, and you could pick up different weapons to wipe out your enemies. Like a chain, you'd hit to the left and the right. You had heels, you'd pop over. Very simple game, but at the same time, very fun and kind of violent. I think that's what the most fun of it was. Actually, I'm now getting goosebumps at the mention of the violence. I am a messed up man. But yeah, Road Rash was very cool. I have yet to see any, and I could be wrong here. You guys can feel free to help me out. There may have been something back in the PlayStation 3 generation that had it. I never saw anything, but an official Road Rash game. Now that might be because the licensing for Road Rash is probably dead, long dead, but it would be fantastic to see it redone or remastered, a Road Rash collection. There actually may be a collection out, a company collection of like, I'm not even sure who manufactured Road Rash or who, what studio did Road Rash. But if there's some sort of collection out with Road Rash included, y'all let me know, please. That'd be awesome. Next up, kind of staying into that sports quote unquote genre, NFL Blitz Arcade Edition. Back on Xbox 360 and I believe PlayStation 3, they had Blitz the League. I wasn't a big fan of the league, mainly because the small amount I played of it, it didn't feel like NFL Blitz. I didn't feel those unnecessary hits to, like, after somebody scored a touchdown, you had like a minute or so to just run at them and hit them. Unnecessary. And that's what Blitz was all about, was unnecessary roughness in the NFL. And these were made up teams too. These weren't official teams, but it was a very cool game, and I would love to see either a remake or a remaster of the arcade edition, because the arcade edition was the shit. All right, next up, Cruisin USA or Cruisin the World. There's also Cruisin Exotica. The Cruisin series for me really hit its peak in the arcade. It was your standard race car setup with the wheels and, you know, the chairs and everything. You could shift the chair back and forth. I used to go up to Walmart a lot and play it. I also played it on Nintendo 64. Now, Cruisin, I don't believe, was a Nintendo exclusive. I think actually the company that, or the studio that did Cruisin, well, then again, now that I think about it, it might have been Rare, who's the same company that did Donkey Kong. Although I could be wrong. But the Cruisin titles were fantastic. They also had chicks in bikinis too that held the flag and kind of danced around. It was really kind of cool, especially for a teenage kid. But it was a really fun game though, because I remember discovering that you could pop a wheelie. You can do it in the console version and on the arcade by double tapping the gas, and if you got right behind another driver or a hill, you could do a flip. And it was awesome. I loved it. It was such a fun game. So that's one I would love to see. Now, next up after the Cruisin series is going to be Vector Man. For those that don't know Vector Man, you probably didn't grow up on Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis, Vector Man kind of became their poster boy for a bit. When it first came out, they actually made two titles for it, Vector Man and Vector Man 2. Vector Man 2 didn't do so well, but the very first one sold. It was one of the titles that sold with the system, so it did really well. I think it came out with the second generation Sega Genesis. Although I could be wrong on that. Anyway, there were three different generations of Sega Genesis. The Generation 1, which was a very big heap as first generation consoles go. The second one was really more of a slim, and then the third was the size of my hand. I kid you not. That's how small the console was. The size of my hand. I have small hands. Unlike somebody else we all know. Like somebody else we all know. Small hands. You know what they say about small hands. Anyway. No, but Vector Man was such a great title. Essentially what it was, you had this dude that was essentially made of balls. When I say balls, I mean spheres. He went around shooting energy beams in this really cool world. And he shot it out of his hands. He was some sort of elemental being. And I can't remember the plot for the story of the game, but I remember it was a 2D shooter, a platform shooter, and it was just a very cool game. So if you get a chance, look it up. Again, it's an old school 2D platform shooter, but man, was it fantastic. So a 3D remake, I think, would actually be pretty awesome. It may not sell a whole lot, but man, it would be cool for some fan service. That's for sure. Okay, next up, probably one of the most brutal and humiliating games I've ever played, a fighting game called Primal Carnage. Now, if you've never heard of Primal Carnage, picture Mortal Kombat, except with dinosaurs and giant apes. That's essentially what it is. This game was brutal and violent, to such an extent that the giant monkey dude that you could play as, I can't remember his name, but he when he defeated you, you could do a humiliation move to where he peed on his enemy. It was brutal. It was, you know, it was back in the day when Mortal Kombat was taken off, Killer Instinct was taken off, and then there was Primal Carnage. And again, a very fun game for reasons, but again, very humiliating, and it fed that need to brutally humiliate your opponent back in the day. It's still around today, but I think it's a little more subtle nowadays to want to humiliate your opponent. Okay, so next up, after Primal Carnage and the humiliation that it was, or it presented to your opponents, Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair is old school. Pretty old school. Dragon's Lair came out on, oh wow, Jaguar CD, I think. I could be wrong on that, but it was around that timeline. This was back when they first tried disc games, and the discs were like laser discs. They were huge. Okay, they were huge, and you had to put them in the console and play them. Dragon's Lair, though, was an animated adventure. I kid you not, animated adventure, cartoon adventure, an interactive cartoon. While some people don't see it as a video game, it was, in essence, a video game. You made decisions, you controlled the character a bit, and you tried to save the princess. Pretty cliche, but kind of goofy at the same time. There was a remake of it for Super Nintendo. Well, not a well, yeah, it was a remake, because it included a lot more control of the character. It was a platformer, and it was hard, man. You know, a lot of people disagree with me here, but I had trouble with this game, which is kind of rare. But I couldn't get past. I spent 20 minutes trying to get past the first gate that comes down, because you got to time it and jump just right. I couldn't do it. Now, it may have been a glitch in the game. Maybe it was supposed to be that hard. I don't know. But I had a lot of trouble with this game. But the old school one before the remake was really cool and very interactive. I loved it, and I kind of hope they would do a remake of it. Maybe not on the animated front. They could probably do that, and it'd kind of be a break away from the mold of all this 3D rendering nowadays. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying. But it was very cool. If you get a chance, look it up here on YouTube. It's called Dragon's Lair, Lair. Again, very cool game. Look up the old school version, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Next one up, speaking of games that were kind of hard, this one involved a band that was very popular at its time. Still popular today. A lot of people still swear by it, and that is Aerosmith. Oh yeah, Aerosmith was involved with a game. Revolution X. Revolution X, it played like the Terminator arcade games where you had a mounted gun that you controlled and you could shoot with. Except Revolution X shoots music CDs at your enemy. It also had a gun. It also shooted like energy bullets, but you could launch discs that did extra damage, but you had to pick up ammo for it. Other than that, the gun had unlimited ammo. And it was, how do you describe... It was a side-scroller, kind of like Area 51 back in the arcade. Again, the Terminator shooters. You didn't have any direct control over the movement of the camera. It just moved with you. And if I remember right, it was more 2D than anything. They did release it, I believe, on Sega CD. I don't remember if they ever released it for PlayStation, though. But with this being very entwined with Aerosmith, there's a chance that a remake of this might not happen, or a remaster. I need to keep saying remaster because that's really what I'm trying to go for here. A remaster is more likely to happen than a remake, I think. But either way, licensing issues may prohibit such a thing. Again, with a bunch of these games. There's a few more I'm going to go over. But this one, I think, is probably the one that may not get a remaster at all. But it would be nice to see it. It was a very fun game. I loved it. Okay, next up. This is one I just threw on here just for the hell of it. But being as this guy is now not with us anymore, may not happen. And the controversy surrounding the game probably prohibits it as well. And I'm talking about Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Yes, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Now, you may not recognize the game, but you definitely recognize the name. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker caused a bit of controversy back in the day because It was a game where you go around rescuing children. Now, take that into account with his very popular trial of child molestation charges, stuff like that. This game actually sold very well. The trial did more for the game than the actual name brand did. But essentially, the thing of it was, back in the day, he also had a movie called Moonwalker, where it was a series of videos worked into a full-length movie. It had Joe Pesci in it. He played a bad guy. For those who don't know Joe Pesci, think Lethal Weapon. He's the guy who was like, they screw you at the drive-thru. That guy. But again, Joe Pesci played this like spider overlord, and Moonwalker is where you got the videos for. Oh man, I can't remember the name of the songs. Annie, Are You Okay? Where he's dancing about in a bar, and you got like these gangsters dancing around and stuff like that. That was part of the movie. There was Leave Me Alone. I think it was called Leave Me Alone, where you see Michael dressed up as a dog, and he's riding a motorcycle, an animated dog. And so that's where most of those videos came from. They were just worked into a single movie. But the game was kind of the same thing, based on the same platform, is that you're going around rescuing children from Joe Pesci. So, but again, probably won't happen. But I was a big fan of Michael Jackson back in the day. I still am. But the game itself, I never beat it, but I played it. I never owned it, but I rented it from Blockbuster. That's how old I'm getting. Anyway, next up, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. God, I love this game back in the day. Super Nintendo exclusive. Very hard to find nowadays. You can easily pay about $80, $90 for it on eBay. It came into Game Exchange one day. I used to work for Game Exchange. For those not in the know, Game Exchange was a locally owned company and is positioned throughout several states here in the South. And it came in one day, and I was like, "Oh my God, I gotta have this," because I played it as a kid. I have a very diverse background when it comes to working for gaming retailers. I loved it. I always loved my job, no matter where I worked, even GameStop. Yes, even GameStop. I worked there for a time. But anyway, I played this as a kid. If you don't know the basis of Zombies Ate My Neighbors, it's a zombie apocalypse with a bunch of goofy fun. A very, very cool game. I think there was a remake, maybe at some point along the way. I can't remember what system, but there is a bell ringing there that there may have been something at some point. But if they were to remake this game, it would be fantastic. Again, look up gameplay here on YouTube. Last but not least, Paperboy. For any Futurama fans, Paperboy is a loose basis for Fry, the delivery boy. Paperboy is a very simple game in the fact that all you do is go through obstacles of delivering papers. That's about it. But it's very fun. There's also kind of a story in there too, from what I remember. But it's a side scroller, kind of like a top down point of view. You're going through and you're throwing papers. You got dogs running at you. You got cars coming at you. You got all kinds of stuff coming at you. But it was a very fun game, very fun. And I would love to see a 3D remake of that. It would be fantastic. Imagine a targeting system, riding a bike, throwing papers at enemies. That'd be kind of cool if they did it right. And I said last, but I forgot to put one on here. I would love to see either a collection or a remake for Pitfall. Pitfall was my childhood. I remember getting a Pitfall game for Super Nintendo. I can't remember the name of it. Pitfall the Adventure or something. The Mayan Adventure, maybe. And I fell in love with this game. This game was fantastic. For those that don't know Pitfall, it's a bit of a staple for old school video games because it's up to the likes of like Pac-Man and Mario and stuff like that. But essentially what you do is you play an adventure, not unlike Indiana Jones, and you go through and you dodge alligators, you jump over big pits, you have a whip you can reach out with and swing across. And this was actually, I think Indiana Jones was a bit of an inspiration for Pitfall. I think they were at about the same time because Pitfall came out on Atari. No, Pitfall came out before Indiana Jones because it came out on Atari 2600, which was 1982, give or take. And Indiana Jones didn't come out until 88. So I think I could be wrong on those years, but that's my recollection. Anyway, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just a bit of a gamer ranting about some terrific remakes that he thinks. If you can think of any, let me know in the comments down below. For now, I'll say salute, and remember, you're awesome. Never let the world tell you otherwise. And I can't think of any more titles. But I know there would be a lot of good remakes if they had a chance, or remasters. So, yeah, if I think of any more, maybe I'll do another video. But for now, I'll say salute. See you.